Russia finds itself in a difficult balancing act as a result of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Moscow wants an immediate halt to the violence without assigning responsibility. Welcome everyone. In today's video, we're going to surprise you. Russia finally joins hands with Palestine. According to President Vladimir Putin, the war began because of the failure to establish a sovereign state in Palestine in accordance with UN resolutions, which he described as a grave injustice. He pointed out that the problem has been made worse by Israel's settlement activities. But before we proceed the further video, if you're new to this channel, remember to go ahead and to hit the bell icon to subscribe, so you won't miss the informative videos we will upload in the future. Russia's cautious stance is a result of its long-standing relations with Israel, the Palestinians, and other regional actors. It also represents the Kremlin's desire to increase its influence in the Middle East by mediating peace. Additionally, Russia attempted to portray the conflicts as an indictment of U.S. policy, hoping that they would divert attention away from Washington and its allies' continued military assistance to Ukraine. On Wednesday, October 25, 2023, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrives at the cabinet meeting of the German government in the Chancellery in Berlin, Germany. Oleg Orlov, a board member of the International Historical Educational Charitable and Human Rights Society, makes memorial gestures following a court session in Moscow, Russia on Wednesday, October 11, 2023. The German cabinet has approved legislation aimed at easing the deportations of rejected asylum seekers. Orlov, co-chair of the human rights organization Memorial, which won the Nobel Peace Prize, was fined about $1,500 by the court for allegedly discrediting the Russian military in his critique of Russia's actions in Ukraine. A human rights advocate who criticized the war in Ukraine is fined by Russian authorities. On September 13, 2023, at the Vostochny Cosmodrome outside the city of Tsiolkovsky, some 200 kilometers 125 miles from the city of Blagoveshchensk in the far eastern Amur region of Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and North Korean leader Kim Jong Un shake hands. On Monday, September 25, North Korea denounced South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol as a diplomatic idiot and a guy with a trash-like brain for using a UN speech to warn about the North's strengthening military relations with Russia. Think tank believes increased rail traffic along the North Korea-Russia border shows Russia is receiving military supplies. What is Russia saying about the war? Putin attributed it to what he saw as the evident failure of Washington's peacemaking efforts, alleging that the U.S. had concentrated on providing financial handouts to the Palestinians while ignoring their core statehood-related concerns. He stressed that every attempt must be made to swiftly terminate the war and encouraged both the Israeli government and Hamas to refrain from targeting civilians, stating that escalation would pose serious concerns. Moscow is making an attempt to keep positive relations with both Israel and the Palestinians, as seen by the carefully calibrated remarks made by Putin and his lieutenants. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, underlined the need for Moscow to continue taking a balanced approach and communicating with both sides, adding that it should permit Russia to assist in mediating a resolution. Moscow is attempting to play the role of a potential mediator while simultaneously hoping that the fighting will divert attention away from the Ukrainian conflict and eventually weaken support from the West for Kyiv. Peskov also made fun of Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, by implying that he should be envious of the United States' current need to concentrate on providing military support to Israel. How has Moscow's Mideast policy evolved? Moscow provided the Palestinians and their Arab allies with diplomatic and military backing during the Cold War as they opposed Israel. Following the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, the Soviet Union severed diplomatic ties with Israel. Just before the USSR collapsed in 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union, reorganized foreign policy and re-established relations with Israel, which led to a change in Moscow's policies. Russia's influence in the world declined in the 10 years following the dissolution of the Soviet Union due to political unrest and economic collapse, which prompted the Kremlin to retreat inward. Putin maintained close relations with Israel while working to resurrect long-standing Middle Eastern relationships after assuming power. Russia joined the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations as one of the 4 mediators in the Middle East, but it was less involved in the efforts than the United States. In order to support President Bashar Assad's administration during a civil war, Moscow teamed up with Iran in 2015 and dispatched troops and bombers to Syria. A longtime friend. Assad was able to regain control of the majority of the country thanks to Russian assistance, which also increased Moscow's influence in the Middle East. How close are Russia and Israel? Russia and Israel have progressively increased economic and other interactions since the dissolution of the Soviet Union and fortified their security ties. Over 1 million individuals from Russia and other former Soviet states have relocated to Israel. This development has been cited by Israeli and Russian officials as a key element in strengthening relations. Even though the Israeli military often assaulted Iranian forces that had joined up with Russian troops in Syria, Moscow's relations with Israel remained solid during Russia's involvement in that nation. Assad's forces shot down a Russian reconnaissance aircraft in 2018 in response to an Israeli airstrike, killing all 15 persons on board. Although the Russian and Israeli militaries maintained deconfliction channels throughout the combat in Syria, the incident briefly strained relations. The Russian-Israeli relationship has been put to the test severely by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Israeli officials have tread carefully. They have expressed sympathy for Kyiv, but declined to arm it. Putin's assertion that Zelensky, a Jew, was actually a neo-Nazi infuriated a lot of Israelis. Early in the conflict, Israeli efforts at mediation were also commended by the Russian president. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a statement that infuriated Ukrainian officials, justified his government's hesitation to transfer military hardware to Kyiv by highlighting the necessity of keeping security contacts open with Moscow in Syria and expressing concern that the weapons supplied to Ukraine might wind up in Iranian hands. How did Russian-Palestinian ties evolve? Moscow was the Palestinians' principal ally throughout the Cold War, providing them with military, economic, and political support. The Palestinian forces were armed, trained, and given considerable subsidies by the Soviet Union. Putin has taken steps to strengthen these connections, which were neglected following the fall of the Soviet Union as the Kremlin concentrated on internal issues. Although it has also made contact with Hamas, Moscow has received Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas on multiple occasions. Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in September 2022 at one of his visits to Moscow. Where do Russia and Iran cooperate? The Soviet Union was criticized by the leaders of the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 as a lesser Satan in contrast to the Great Satan or the United States. But Russia and Iran developed strong connections following the fall of the Soviet Union as Iran's tensions with the West increased. Moscow constructed Iran's first nuclear power facility and strengthened its relations with Tehran. As Iran and Syria joined forces to support Assad's administration during the Syrian conflict, their relations became increasingly closer. Iran has given Moscow hundreds of Shahed explosive drones throughout the conflict in Ukraine, which the Russian military has used to target Ukraine's vital infrastructure and energy sectors. Russia purportedly received drone technology from Iran as well, and Russia constructed a facility to manufacture them. Moscow is anticipated to give Iran cutting-edge fighter jets and other contemporary armaments in exchange. What other alliances has Moscow sought? Russia has taken steps to strengthen ties with Saudi Arabia, Iran's principal regional foe, as part of its efforts to increase its influence globally. Despite the fact that the Saudis supported Assad's opponents and Moscow supported the Syrian president, Riyadh and Moscow have been able to work out their differences and increase their collaboration on other fronts. Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have developed tight personal relationships which have grown stronger as US-Saudi relations have been bogged down in disagreements in recent years. Putin's connections to bin Salman made it possible for Moscow and Riyadh to lead an OPEC agreement to reduce oil supply, which raised falling oil prices to the advantage of oil-producing nations. That's all for today's video.